Mm-hmm.
So I'm just checking in the audience if I see anyone asking. Maybe in the meantime, I have a question regarding what you have basically said at some point regarding the non-symmetry of the tensor. At some point, you were showing like in one direction some property and then some other in the other. In the mechanical sense, what is non-symmetric in your tensor? Which part?
So are you talking about, so let me come back to this.
Yes, that's probably the easiest. At some point you had a deformation, basically you were pushing from the top on some medium and then it was
a video, you mean? Yeah, this one?
No, go further. I will just stop you. You can go fast.
Are you sure it's not before?
Well, it's probably before. Basically, you had the medium and you were pushing from the top, and it was deforming more on the right side than on the left side. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So the question is, this medium that you see on the top left, from the elastic point of view, how is it described? You said it's not symmetric. Which terms are non-symmetric?
Let me see. Do I have? Can I write?
I think so. I'm not sure if you can.
Yes. Oh, let's see. Oh no, that's not going to work. So basically, the way actually our colleagues in Chicago describe this is you have stress as a function of strain, right? And then in stress, you have different types of stress. You have expansion. Then you have rotation, so torque stress. Oh, it's gonna work. It's not gonna work. Well, torque. Then you have shear in one direction, then shear in the other. Okay.
Okay.
And basically, when you have a normal medium, normal isotropic medium, let's say the shear modulus is the coefficient that relates the shear stress in one direction to the shear strain in one direction to the shear stress in the same direction, right? Or the bulk modulus is what it's the modulus that relates, let's say, the expansion, so the volumetric strain, to the pressure, right? In this system, you have new tensors. That's basically the new element in those tensor that basically describe a coupling between shear in one direction and shear in the other. So it's basically a coupling between shear strain in one direction and shear strain in the other. Okay. Usually it's forbidden when you have isotropic media. Right? Usually the only way to have coupling between those shear is to have an anisotropy. Here you can have an isotropic medium that still can couple two different shear modes. So that's an example of what you have, and also so and those terms, they come from non-conservative parts, so you cannot derive those terms from elastic energy, which means that if you actually do a cycle in the shear, so you do first a shear 1, then you shear 2, then you unshear 1, and then you unshear 2, you would do work. The system will actually inject work. But if you do the opposite, if you first do shear 2, then do shear 1, then undo shear 2, then undo shear 1, then you will take away work. So there's actually the paper of Colin Scheibner and Lucian Vitalis in Nature Physics from last year. That's where they explore the concept theoretically in a way. And that's really that's really the essence of defining this odd elasticity in those media. Yeah. And so what you see here is basically the odd response. So you actually have a symmetric point load here that creates a symmetric shear. But here you see that it actually will bend and create asymmetric shear in the response.
Okay, and then when you refer to the non-symmetric tensor, it's not the usual way of the usual elasticity tensor that we are used to in mechanics, but it's the one how should I call it, the modified one by I forgot if it's Vincent Vitali who
Vitali. Yeah. And in the case where you're isotropic, basically, when you're isotropic in elasticity, you have two moduli, right? And in here, you add two more. That comes, and one of them comes from the coupling between the shear, that is asymmetric, and the other comes from whether if you have an internal torque density, net torque, then you will couple internal pressure whenever you change the pressure or let's say whenever you have volumetric strain, this will give you a net torque at the end. But we don't have that in our system because we don't. To do this, you need to have like the rolling colloids. You need to have a net torque injection, net torque density. For us, since we float on the table, we actually don't inject net momentum, right?
Okay, good. Okay, so I was just confused by the name of but now it's clear from that aspect. And the bottom figure where you have this evanescent wave on top of the propagating one, then it means that inside of your effective parameters in your material, you have some imaginary parts too. You have some losses like.
Absolutely, yeah. That comes. It's exactly the same physics than here, right? Except now it's not in a 1D chain. It's on at an interface. So actually we can show it's really a Rayleigh wave, and it's really you just have to revisit those Rayleigh waves. But now that with that asymmetry, with that skin effect, yeah.
And these imaginary parts that you would use in the description of an effective medium for waves, will this vanish if omega tends to 0?
No. If omega tends to 0, you tend to have this static response here. So it doesn't vanish.
Because in your system, you bring energy from the outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you could find tricks to not do that by energy injection somehow, by harvesting energy from vibrations. It would be very cool. But for now, I guess if I come back to this sketch, it's really it's nice to try to be as as much in this corner as possible, right? But at some points there's no free lunch, right? So you have to either inject energy or use some transistors at some point. But what I'm really interested in is actually to try to serve this line and try to go there as much as possible, and trying to do as you suggest, trying to harvest vibrations. It's potentially interesting. I think you could do like shunt piezos, right? If you somehow use shunt piezos and then make smart electrical oscillators, and maybe you don't need energy inputs. But then I don't think it can be at I don't think it can work at 0 frequencies. Then it's only on a finite range, I guess. Yeah. So no free lunch.
Yeah. I mean, no one else is raising the hand at the moment, so I will just take the opportunity to ask another question. So here, the work you are doing on a rather big scale is nice for the physical aspects, so to demonstrate the different effects. If one would like to use it as an effective medium and to miniaturize this stuff by orders of magnitude, then many of this like active engines and stuff you are using simply would not work. How could you do it at let's say at micron scale?
So you have those people, the group of Itai Cohen in Cornell. They are specializing themselves into graphene origami, and they make robots that have graphene legs that can bend, and on which they can directly imprint photovoltaic cells and electronics, and they can make millions at a time, right? And so if you wanted to do that, I think that's what they do is potentially a strategy to do this at the small scale, and then you have interesting applications for make autonomous surgeons that can go in your body and do whatever, biopsy or a little surgery, right? Except they also face the same problem. There's how much to put in electronics versus how much global versus local control. So they have the very same problematics. But I think there's quite an exciting avenue there. I also think that actually with those robots, you're not so far away from applications. For instance, we have discussions with people in aerospace or when they want to do damping. And there, if you're, for instance, if you want to absorb energy at low frequencies, it's not very good to use resonators or passive surfaces anymore. And then it can become competitive to actually use actuators. And then, yeah, so actually we have collaboration with TU Delft, who are specialized in, mechatronics and control theory, where actually we try to see whether some of those concepts could be, if you can scale down by a factor 10, this can become competitive for absorbing vibrations in whatever engineering structure you can think of. So, and okay, maybe you don't have many unit cells, but again, metamaterials, except when you know how to use a nanoscribe, are rarely, I guess, beyond 10, 20 unit cells, and you can still do interesting, mechanics or wave phenomena with it, I think.
Okay, thanks. So do we have more questions?
I've got one actually. What happens if you remove one of your cells in? So you were showing us some edge effects and so on. So what happens if you remove some cells in your metamaterial?
Well, that if you remove some cells, I guess you try to create disorder, defects. So if you don't do anything more than that, you will start to have typical disordered wave physics, like Anderson localization and so on, I think, if you start to play those games. But then I don't really know what happens, in this odd media with the disordered odd media.
You would get some enhancement of local amplification of the vibrations, no?
Yeah,
So,
but maybe it's a bit as if maybe you had a.
I mean, what happens to your cycle if you had some defects? You would preserve the cycles, in your in the dynamics?
Actually, I think Jonas started to do that with the locomoting ring there. And I think it still is functional. Yeah, here, the ring. I mean, he did that for this one, I think.
So it's robust with respect to defects? I mean,
it is to a degree. If you do too much, that of course you will have either localization or will scatter strongly. But that's I think where combining with topology is interesting, because some topology, if you make a topological band structure, you can actually create architectures that are robust to such defects more than just let's say the normal system. So I think that's a very interesting question there. I know, for instance, that those guys in this paper, they also look at what happens when you have disorder, and they show that it works to a degree, I guess. But fundamentally revisiting Anderson's physics with that, I think I'm not sure it's been done. I think it's quite.
So you have mentioned some off bifurcation before, so you have the onset of chaos and this kind of stuff. So did you look into, I mean, it's a silly question, Lyapunov exponent, or these kinds of I mean, did you have this kind of angle? Did you adopt this kind of angle to look at these structures, or you just looked at?
No,
cycles?
not yet. I think we're not yet there. What we're trying to do now is to model these things in terms of amplitude equations, like I was mentioning here.
Okay.
And there you can start to study maybe more seriously bifurcations and different types of limit cycles. But we're not there yet, I think. So to have a comprehensive picture is a bit
So when you have these cycles, you classify them with Poincaré-Bendixson theorem. I mean, you have this kind of classification.
We don't do that yet. No.
You don't do that yet.
No. But that's definitely to that direction that is interesting. To pursue. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I mean, because I mean, I discover I mean, it's fantastic, this talk, because I discover this whole new direction. So this, I mean, I some people like, I mean, I'm sure you know this group, the group of David Abigoni, in.
Yeah.
Okay, so they look also at this kind of bifurcation in.
Yeah.
But,
in active structures as well, right? Yeah. Or non-conservative structures, let's say. Yeah. Fluttering and so on, right? I guess. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess the main difference with what David Ebigoni is doing is here we look at the many body limit. So what happens when you have many,
of course, yes, yeah.
and
So,
I think he still looks at relatively low dimensional objects or
that's right.
yeah. But yeah, it's also the beginning for us in a way. So it's it's
And-
there's many things to do, and it's just hard to choose one to first do to do first, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
And following on Muammer's remarks, so in terms of this effective properties, so you look at this kind of, so of course you can model your structure by some kind of discrete structure,
Mm-hmm.
and you can then move from the discrete structure to the continua. You just imagine that you have a very large amount of
Yeah,
cells
yeah.
and so on. And so I think this goes in the direction of Muammer's question. I did not really understand. So what is this kind of elasticity tensor? Again, it's not the usual elasticity tensor I'm used to. So what is the name you give to it, Muammer?
Well, people who've coined it
Yeah.
are called that odd elasticity.
Odd elasticity.
Yeah.
And
So
it has
I-
nothing to do with micropolar elasticity. It's totally different.
No, you don't need an extra tensor like you do in Coursera elasticity, right? So
Okay.
here you can describe
Okay.
everything in terms of the normal tensor. There's no
Yeah.
polar field on top of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
But you have 4 elasticity constant just instead of 2.
So
yes.
it's like
Yeah. And you can also do that with viscosity.
Okay.
Actually, there's a paper by Avron in '95 who was suggesting to describe the viscosity of electrons with an odd viscosity tensor. But it's not the only thing. Odd elasticity, you can define elasticity only when you have translation invariance, right?
Okay.
But we don't do that all the time, right? Here we actually add net torques because our things are not floating on the table. So there's no translation invariance.
Yeah.
And so we don't have elasticity, but we still have an odd medium. But then, it's not the elastic tensors are not the proper way of looking at those. Then you need to just look at dynamical matrices. So the one that relates displacements and force. Usually in elasticity, you look at tensors because then the translation invariance is encoded. So that's the most convenient way to do it, right? But for those systems in which you add net momentum, so you don't have translation invariance, you don't do elasticity simply, right? So that's really the and then that's really just what I was mentioning there at the beginning, right?
Yeah, this is really fascinating, and I also find the remark of Muammer very relevant of trying to scale down all this stuff. So you mentioned this group in Cornell who does similar things with graphene.
Yeah, and a lot of people now start to do that. In all sorts of ways to use, smart polymers or colloids or things like this, right? So it's really something that interests a lot of people in, I guess, the community, soft matter, or even robotics to some extent. So it's really, I mean, I expect that some progresses will be made there, so that we can. For us, we're mostly primarily interested in the concept, so then we make those robots. But if ultimately, that's nice to actually make those, right? Yeah.
So, and you touched upon a little bit about non-Hermitian elasticity, let's say. This is a framework, more or less, of what.
Well, no, I mean,
No?
before actually, in fact, I used to call that non-Hermitian mechanics because of this analogy between those two things.
Yeah.
Now I kind of tend towards odds because it's simpler, right?
Okay, it's simplicity. Okay, all right. Okay.
It's the same. It's just interactions, local interactions that are asymmetric and non-conservative, right?
Okay.
And so, but at the end of the day, these two equations, at the linear level, this is just an eigenvalue problem, right? So you're just interested in solving the spectrum and the eigenvalue, and so they are very similar in many aspects, in many regards, right? And so a lot of when if you look at the eigenfunctions or the eigenvalues of this equation, they're very connected physics to this one there. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
lovely talk anyway.
And do we have more questions from the audience? Checking. Apparently, no one is raising his hand. So I would like to say once more again, it was a nice talk, and I would like to say thank you very much for the opening of our series of lectures for this year.
My pleasure.
And, your talk was recorded. It will be available, and the good thing also is that very soon we will have the opportunity to allocate a DOI to every talk that is given here.
Cool.
Which gives some historical aspect to it, and then they will be permanently recorded and archived.
Wow, that's nice.
Which
we don't need to write papers anymore, I guess.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just come to our webinars and
This gives you the possibility to the people to cite it on one hand, and on the other hand, it gives you some insurance that what you are showing here is not like lost, that you are not just because you are talking to some people that you don't know who is sitting there, and some idea could be lost from the webinars, and in that way we give you some insurance that your work is archived in a way.
Yeah, that's great.
Especially if when you present stuff that is not published.
no, and I think it's, in my opinion, it's one of the new ways of also disseminating research, because there is, for instance, a whole community in, let's say, mathematics, physics, which doesn't publish much, but they disseminate their ideas through seminars. They used to do this. It's and here effectively. Yeah, for instance, when you give such a talk, it's, I mean, of course, you generate lots of interest, you inspire people, and so, yeah, proper credit should be given, yeah. Anyway, I think it was perfect as an inaugural talk for this new season. What do you think, Bogdan and Muammer?
It was perfect. I liked it very much. I mean, it's this new way of approaching the matter, the programmable matter that many people as you said, in the robotic community, many people are dreaming about the possibility of giving some effective properties to the material by potentially an external stimulus. And as Corentin has shown, it's already not so easy to do it on the macro scale. Now on the micro scale, it's even much more difficult.
Yeah.
However, it's probably one of the future aspects of the field.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah. You need a high energy density, right? And it's not so easy to get a high energy density, right? Not power, no, not energy density, power density, right? In your material to do that, right? And it's not so easy, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah. On personal note, I just find fun to just revisit, Landau-Lewis sheets of elasticity and mechanics. With just one of the assumptions of the first pages that you broke, I guess, or you can break. That's just fun, to do.
Great. Thanks, Corentin. Another novelty, I mean, to get not a reward, but to thanks to our speakers, is that you can propose a next speaker, and we have a doodle list, and you can choose one or two speakers for the next seminars.
And you would share the session.
You may share the session. Yeah. This is also thanks to our previous speakers.
For instance, Corentin, these people you mentioned from Cornell, it might be nice to propose
I can come up with people where they're not always in the wave community, but
we go beyond waves. I believe that metamaterials, provided you can assess some effective properties to matter. Anything is a metamaterial according to Martin Wegener's definition, no?
Well, to me, there's this notion of design or tunability, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's vast. It's lovely. Muammer, Bogdan, so who is our next speaker?
Let me have a look. Be
Yeah.
sure.
So that will be for the 12th of October because we run the webinar.
Wang Zhang from
Yes.
Nanjing University on the
Perfect.
next Tuesday.
Ah, okay. We changed
He's
the.
going on Valley Hall topological acoustics.
Well, I think it's a perfect continuation after Corentin's talk. Because you touched upon also topology as well, huh? A little bit.
Yeah, we will. It's also for me, it's an interesting way to maybe look at design because you only have one integer that can tell you things, right? So that's also interesting from this perspective. And yeah,
I particularly liked the rugby spectrum that was twisted into a fish-like spectrum. So yeah. Well, anyway, now I need to read your papers and try to figure out what you're doing. Okay, so guys, I think it's good for the first day. We will call it a day, huh? For the first session. And as you would know, Corentin, so we will make this link permanently available, and people who usually watch these talks are people from the GDR, Meta, Wave. Who else, guys?
Many talks I've actually seen more times after that we can actually see many people are fully looking at them, because unfortunately nowadays the time schedule is not easy for everyone. So 3 p.m. is unfortunate for many people.
It's early for United States, for instance, for the East Coast. But
and I guess people start to travel again also, right? I guess that's not yet.
yeah,
Hybrid.
we would like to.
Way.
Yeah. Anyhow, that was fun. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Have a good day, all.